Hello and welcome to season 4, episode 19 of Dualistic Unity. I don't know what the fuck is going on, and I'm becoming more and more certain about how uncertain everything is. It's an interesting dichotomy to recognize things more and more clearly, at least what I think is clarity, but then as I do more and more that I don't know. And I feel like I know so much less than I ever have, and yet I am understanding so much more at the same time. It's a strange place to be in.
And I am at the service of the whole. And I wonder how much of that is influenced by the one or possibly the several who view themselves that way the most. I wonder how much of our collective direction is influenced by those who really do view themselves as the whole to a greater degree. So, in other words, they're not trying to get anywhere, and as such, are creating more fluidity, are creating more capacity for change and influencing the entire thing simply because they're not separating themselves so much into a small concept that is separate from the whole. How much of our collective direction is based upon those who are happy being exactly where they are and influenced by those who are not? How many people who are not happy with where they are and what they are does it take to throw off the rhythm that would be set by those who are?
That's a fantastic question. And we've had a pretty fun day so far digging into this this recognition. And I feel like everything we talked about on the Raw episode earlier and the Patreon chat has kind of course, been leading to whatever the fuck we're going to talk about on this episode and wherever this goes. But it makes me wonder because there is that, in that recognition that it's all you, you're not what you think. Of course, there's going to be influence over all of you as you begin to recognize that more and more clearly. But it's not what we think that it is. It's never been what we think that it is. It's not that egotistical idea of, oh, so I'm going to recognize all of it so I can get what I want and get my way and control everyone and have an impact over the way people think and get them to where I want them to be. Who wants that? Who wants them to get to that spot? Who wants the world to change? If not the thing that's in the way of you recognizing how much it's already changing as you, through you, and how much you can get out of the way and let go of the desire for things to happen in any specific way, shape, or form. How much influence does that process have over the entirety of you once you begin to find more alignment with that reality that becomes more and more obvious the more and more you let go? How much influence does it really have? But it's not in a direction. It's not towards a destination. It's just here now. Just being you is all it really comes down to.
Isn't that funny? It's so interesting that we want change, that we envision change that we want, or even change that we fear. And as a result, we miss the change that we are. We end up living in this world of expectations, living in this world of fiction, trying to be something, missing everything that we have been the entire time. It's such an interesting thing to recognize that wholeness is not something you need to pursue. Being complete is not something that you can achieve. It's what you are when you're not convincing yourself otherwise. And even when you are convincing yourself otherwise, it's just that you won't act that way if you're convincing yourself otherwise. And so there is a significant change of mind between the recognition that you are already everything that is, and we'll get into that, versus you are a small piece of everything that is. Because if you are everything that is, then you have to live for you, here and now, which is everything that is. But if you're looking towards the future, now you've separated yourself because you're not being here, where you are whole. You are trying to get to somewhere else where you might become whole. And that is immediately diminishing what you are now.
So it really does come down to whether you're seeing it or missing it. And all the stories we get caught up in, all the desires to get somewhere, just us missing it over and over and over and over, as we just come back to being what we are here and now, not needing to get anywhere, not thinking that the situation we're currently in means anything about the reality of what we are. We're seeing it. And even when we don't necessarily recognize that we're seeing it, we're seeing it. And that state of relaxation is seeing it. And we get glimpses of it. We keep coming to recognitions that are it, but there's still a difference between seeing it and knowing what you're seeing versus seeing it and not knowing what you're seeing, because you're still very much attached to you, because you can't be the idea of you and be it. And they don't, like, as much as we want to think that we can, it isn't. Yeah, because as soon as you're something, you're not everything. And that being nothing, doing nothing is being and doing everything, as Ray said a few weeks ago. And yet we have this story that hinders us from being that. You can't possibly be something within everything and also everything, but we can have the experience of that. And it doesn't really change the experience of being here now when you're in it here now, but it's just without so much fear, without so much concern, without so much of a story. So it does change everything because it changes the entirety of your experience of being here now, but you're still here now, doing the same sort of shit, you know, going to sleep, brushing your teeth, eating food, doing the dishes, all that stuff. But it's in a completely different mentality because there isn't a place that you're getting. You've already arrived.
And I would go so far as to say that it is, in fact, always obvious, even when we're looking at the idea of ourself as truth. It's the reason we fear loneliness, because unity through the perspective of the ego is terrifying. But when you're not identifying as the ego, loneliness is just aloneness. It's the fact. It's what is. It's existence. There's no negative intonation to that. So even when we're caught up in our ego, we can feel the gravity of our existence. We just translate it through the idea of ourselves. And so it becomes loneliness. It becomes a lack of attention from quote unquote other people instead of a deepening connection to more of you. And so everything gets twisted by this simple concept of who we are. But it's always obvious in the intensity of the feeling when you're being still and silent in the here and now. This is why it's so telling when you ask someone, just sit still and watch how difficult that is, because it's intense. It's the reason we go seeking distractions when we identify, right? Or it's even the reason that we go seeking distractions in identifying, is because the alternative is to be here now in uncertainty with all of the emotional spectrum that you are feeling without ever trying to assign a meaning to it that has anything to do with your character. See how that can be a little off-putting? That means that you are just subject to the emotional spectrum in the same way that you are subject to the weather.
It's actually funny. I saw a video yesterday using an analogy of experiencing emotions because it was raining. They stepped outside and resisting the emotions that you're experiencing is like experiencing the rain and just doing this, thinking that you're not going to experience it versus being willing to experience the emotions as they are, is just dropping the hand and just doesn't make it comfortable, but at least there isn't that resistance and idea that it should be or could be even any different than it is. Because even as you were saying that, there is an immediate sort of discomfort, like a being in the eye of a storm sort of feeling, like being in a whirlpool and just letting go and not knowing where it's going to go, not knowing where you're going to end up, not knowing where you're going to get spit out of, but an understanding that you're the whirlpool, the perspective totally shifts. You're no longer the thing, whirlpool, you're the whirlpool itself. And so there isn't the concern for where you end up or what it means about you or where you get to within that whirlpool because you're the whole thing. And that's what it comes down to is the concern for what it means about you, like loneliness versus being alone. If you're alone and it means something about you, it diminishes your value because you're alone. Boom, you're lonely. If you're alone and it doesn't mean anything about you, just is what it is. But we're so used to that being the common narrative. Oh, I don't want to be alone. And it's funny how it's even egotistically sort of infiltrated that we have the narrative that we shouldn't be alone. It means something about me. I don't want to be alone. It's that resistance to the reality of what's actually happening, which doesn't need the concern. And so when you start to recognize closer to the reality of what you are and see that this means that you're alone, that there's the initial concern because you're so caught in that being such a massive part of your reality and experience, that concern for being alone. So it's still going to, even through recognizing how alone you really are beyond the narrative, that feeling is still sort of there. And that's where the concern comes from, but it isn't necessary. You can recognize how alone you are without that additional concern, which is interesting, how it's able to still infiltrate the egotistical dualistic mentality as well.
And it just got me thinking about one of our earliest lessons in this form, which is the lesson of object permanence. When we are born into the world and then all of a sudden we see our parents or our caregiver leave the room and we panic because we assume they have stopped existing. And what's interesting is that we will be reassured at that point and told, no, no, we still exist. Don't worry. And right there, there is a division that is taught. There's more to it, isn't there? And we never explore it as they get older. It's not just like, don't worry, we exist in the world as well. But in fact, we're equal awarenesses to you that exist by virtue of us being existence, that we're all in part of the same thing existing only to ourselves, which isn't incorrect, but that doesn't make everything else less real. Like there's so much more to the paradox rather than just, don't worry, your parents are in the next room on this planet in a separate body, which is the lesson that we learn right away. They haven't stopped existing. You're you and they're them, and there's a world that you exist within. And that's not the whole story.
So with this, it's interesting because when they leave the room and when we're a child, we get very concerned for that because it's an aspect of we see everything as me in the room that leaves. That means that to us, it's like they're no longer exist, which is both the reality and not the reality, but the reality to us. And because it shifts from, and then as we learn that they do still exist, they don't exist in our reality as we're seeing it. They exist now in our mind, right? The idea of them is still there because we have the idea that they exist in another room, another part of reality, but they're just as much dead to you as they would be if they were actually dead. And I've had this thought before that, who's to say right now, like any of my friends I could think of, they don't exist within my reality right now. So is that not equatable to them straight up being dead in a sense?
Or existing in potential.
Yeah, as they always do. Right. And it's never what I think that they are because it shifts. And I say it shifts from existing only within your mind, but it always only exists inside of your mind. And it's the narratives that we hold on to that maintains the idea that takes away from the reality of what they are. And I think that's a big reason why we resist so much when people change, right? Because it no longer fits with the story inside of our head. So we have to start to change the story. And we're just always settling upon false certainties about what people are and what they mean about us and our experience, because they are us. And we just maintain the ideas of them, thinking that it's providing some comfort to us, like to be able to put them in a box. And so it's interesting in that experience of being a child when someone leaves, it's because there's less of an idea. And without that idea, it's just you. It's just your experience that they are. And then they're no longer your experience when they leave the room. And because there isn't an idea attached to them, you can't grapple with the idea until an idea comes up. And then you're able to, okay, they aren't gone forever. They're just in another room because you have now a story of them that you can maintain, whether they're in the room or not. And that's the perception of division.
See, it's interesting because at our age, we describe all of this conceptually, but to an infant, it's totally experiential. Like they are born into this very intense experience of being totally helpless in a giant reality that's cold, noisy, has feeling and texture. You have no muscles whatsoever. You can't communicate anything at all. And so all of a sudden, somebody comes into your view or into your experience and they reassure you simply by being there. And you feel connection and you feel, a little bit more like yourself because you're not panicking and you're not feeling so afraid. So you see immediately the duality enters. And then that familiar presence leaves and you're left back with yourself. And now you feel diminished as a result of having that first experience where that person actually made you feel more connected because you yourself are born into a state of vulnerability. There is no state more likely to make you feel like you lack than being born into the world where you have no experience or skills. None. So that first comforting voice, that first presence means everything. And then they leave and we panic, thinking that they have stopped being a part of us, thinking that proximity has somehow changed the connection. Because of course we think that way. We're small and vulnerable and we feel alone, right? And that's why reassurance as we grow up is so important for parents to do. Not to reassure you like, I'm here for you, but you're okay. You're okay. But unfortunately, if you have an egotistical parent or if you have a parent that wants to be needed, they will often focus on, I'm here for you. I'll always be around, rather than you're okay. You're always whole and complete. You're always going to be exactly as valuable as you have always been. So there's a difference in perspective. Changes everything.
Yeah, because you're feeling like you're taken care of by other, another person, as opposed to recognizing that you always have you. And as you said, as that other person relies upon their ability to take care of you to gain value, there's that attachment that they reinforce as you grow up. And that attachment can last for your entire life or their entire life until they're gone. And there's never the necessary reassurance or the actually beneficial reassurance by them that they're there, but you have you and you'll always have you. And as long as you can maintain that, there isn't so much need for anyone else to quote unquote take care of you. But as that is reinforced by the parent, then that need is built, right? And then the parent isn't there so much anymore. Say you become an adult, 18, 20, whatever, and they're not so involved in your life anymore. Feels like there's a void there. There's a hole that needs to be filled. And then we're looking for that in everyone we interact with. And there's our, societal desire for love to fill the insatiable void that wasn't actually there, that's just reinforced by our perception of division. And so as that drops, there isn't, the void subsides. or the whole that we perceived there to be that wasn't actually there, but it was just reinforced through growing up because they had a void and you filled that void, and it can't be one without the other. And that's all you know growing up because you are, as you said, so vulnerable and willing to take everything as face value. Like we're gullible as fuck as children, right? We'll believe anything. Anyone who we deem to be smart or superior or an authority, anything they say, be like, oh yeah, that's got to be it. They tell us that, and then they tell us things, and they show us certain things, and they feel like they need it from you, and so you rely upon them, and then it creates this just thing that is filled for a bit, but then leaves, and then we spend our whole life trying to find it again.
Isn't it interesting? Because so much of our trauma as children comes from parents who don't recognize that they're everything. It comes from their lack. It comes from their sense that they need to be something or do something or prove something. And so our trauma follows that mentality. We learn from that mentality. And what we learn is that we're separate because it perceives itself to be separate. But this is what we're chipping away at very, very slowly. It's interesting what you were saying there about children being gullible, because typically we totally are as children until we have experienced trauma. And because why wouldn't we trust ourselves? Why wouldn't we trust what our experience is? And I wanted to get back to this. As I said earlier, you are the all of everything that you know. You are the entirety of your experience. And as a child, that is glaringly obvious to the point where you wouldn't even ask an adult until one day you do. Somewhere between 7 and 10, you go, is this real? Am I real? And why do you ask that? Well, because you've learned the concept real. Because you've learned that there is a such thing as unreal, which is laughable. But up until that moment, there was just you. And that never changed. Everybody is you. Everybody is the entirety of their existence. It's just that we are that much. We are that connected.
And so with the trauma, that makes sense then because we're trusting ourselves until there's a reason not to. And then it's like the trust goes from 100% to 0%. And then there's no trust in any aspect of ourself, including ourself. Right. And because, because we see there's no perception of division whatsoever with those we're interacting with and ourself. There's no idea of ourself. There's no idea of them. And so it's not even that this is me and I am one with everything and all that conceptual bullshit. It's that it's all me. And so you're trusting yourself is trusting them. And so as that trust drops, that trust is all encompassing of everything that you thought that you were. And so you no longer trust yourself and you find a way to cope with that. And then that impacts, and it's for anything, any degree of the traumatic spectrum. It can be anything, like from the worst of traumas to, the subtle traumas we experience where, we have a trust in someone to act in a certain way or express things in a certain way. And as that trust is diminished, our trust in ourselves is diminished as well. And that's kind of the traumatic experience is the loss of trust in yourself, the loss of faith in yourself. Because the faith in yourself was all encompassing until it wasn't, until there was a reason to not have faith in that. And that just inevitably involves yourself as well. And then, as I said, you find a way to cope with that. You avoid the situations that you feel like that bring up those memories, those experiences of that traumatic experience. And then you just avoid it thinking, I've been there. I can't do that. That's scary. Or I can't face that, or I can't interact with people, can even get to that point because all of the people that you ever interact with are expressions of that you that you lost faith in through, another person, but it was just you too. So losing faith in that person is losing faith in yourself, because you are yourself and you're always you. It's all you. So that's the gravity of being a child and recognizing this without the wherewithal to understand what's going on. And that's just the gravity of being a fucking parent too, is the responsibility of that, because they see you as them. So how you interact with them, how you interact with the world, is them interacting with the world as far as they can tell. And that's what they're learning from. And that's how they're learning to deal with the world, is through that iteration of them as you. So there's a tremendous responsibility as a parent to be that expression of what, not to guide them or show them, because again, if you're deriving your value from them being attached to you, that's creating a fucking inevitable hole that's going to have to be filled by someone else. That's, I guess, where, not to like lighten this too much, but like, daddy issues and mommy issues come from, is from a void that's left from something that was filled, or something that was hurt, or something that was taken, or given too much of. And whatever it was derived from them not seeing their wholeness and their completeness. And then it just translated into your experience, and the only way you knew how to do so, and you grabbed onto the things that you could in order to cope with it. And then that set the stage for the rest of your life.
Because it's not necessarily the traumatic event that is the problem, but it's what we take from the traumatic event. It's the reaction that we learn from the traumatic event. And it really is that loss of faith, not just in reality, but in our ability to deal with reality, in our ability to feel safe around other people. And so it makes so much sense as we get older, as we have lost the sense that we can be safe as ourselves, that the journey towards, once again, being feels so good. Like that's what this conversation is a return to that subjective experience before we learned all of this division and took it as truth. We're actually scaling everything back, all the way back to object permanence, in order to reestablish a different perspective of what we're doing with clearer eyes, because nobody around us is doing that. And so we get born into this collective perspective of division. We get raised by people who have thus been hurt by that collective perspective of division, and are trying to protect themselves and find value in themselves, and so are not sensitive enough to be aware of the children that they're bringing into the world, and the division that they are teaching those children by virtue of just feeling less. And this is where the expression, the sins of the father passes to the son, comes from. We teach our commitment to identity as truth to our children because we are afraid and we think it's going to protect them, despite the fact that it has done nothing but reinforce fear and expectation throughout our entire life.
And that's always it. Like, we're always either recognizing the reality of us, like you were saying earlier today. There's two directions: towards yourself or away from yourself. And as you're going away from yourself, everything you do is going to be with the desire to just feel better. Like it's just settling for the shallowest fucking shit you can find, because you're running away from the reality of what you are, and you're trying to cope with that, trying to cope with running away from yourself through getting lost more and more in the perception of division, and trying to grab onto the things that make that divided idea mean something, give that divided idea value. When you just start going in the other direction towards yourself, that value is inherent to what you are. You can't not have that. But the further you get from it, the more things you have to try and grab onto in order to find it. again. And so you're lost in concepts, lost in ideas, lost in things that are going to make you more. That are going to make you feel a little bit better, because nothing actually allows you to get better besides turning around, going in the other direction, letting go of that perspective of division. There is no thing you can grab onto in the direction away from yourself that is going to improve the reality of what you are, because you're caught in an illusion. Like it couldn't possibly help you. It couldn't possibly get you to a spot, but we've gotten so caught in the idea of what we are as being the truth that we can't see that fundamental nature, the root of what we think we are, isn't it. It never is. But we've settled on that. And so then we're looking at things like, okay, I'm this, I know myself, and it's never it. We keep settling upon an idea, keep slipping away because it's never the thing. More things keep coming into our reality, showing us that that's not the reality of what it is. And we're so caught in identity and ideas that think, okay, I'm not this. Well, then I must be this. Like, or maybe you're none of them. There's another direction you can take towards the reality of what you are. But you have to let go of everything that you think is giving you value, because throughout the course of going in said direction away from yourself, you've built up a lot of things that you think you derive your value from, and they're all reinforcing what has taken you further down that path. Whether it's a positive or negative idea of yourself, it's still reinforcing the idea of you. And so it's not the positive idea that you have to maintain, because it immediately brings into question or brings into reality the negative idea of you. You don't have to have an idea of you. And saying that even gets pushed back. Even just saying you don't have to cling to an idea, it doesn't compute in a certain mentality. But that's what allows you to start going towards yourself, towards being free, letting go. But you have to let go of both sides of that coin, which means all the things that you think you derive your value from, because what's left when you go in the other direction is just you being whole. There is no prerequisite to being whole. There's nothing you have to prove in order to be whole. It's just the reality of what you are. But it's I don't know. There's a lot you have to let go of in order to recognize that.
Well, there is a whole other level of processing that really is required to be living in this state of mind. I mean, at the end of the day, it's really easy to be egotistical. It's really easy to identify. All I have to do is look at something and want it. That's it. That is as hard as my life is. I don't feel complete. That will complete me. Fetch. And then when that doesn't work, something else. And when that doesn't work, something else. And when that doesn't work, something else. And if I just keep following that template, obviously one day it's going to pan out, right? And the reason I do that is because the alternative is that this is far more complicated, that there is more to this, and that I can't just simplify it down to a simple concept or a simple journey from less to more, that I have to sit in this experience. And so we don't. But it's not that we can't, it's that nobody around us is doing so because it doesn't have any benefit in the current world system that we have created through this mentality. This is the reason dualistic unity is so encouraging to me, because what we're doing here has nothing to do with marketing. It has nothing to do with selling a product. It has nothing to do with anybody needing anything to be anything. And it's working nonetheless, without needing to be anything special, without needing to be a religion, without needing to be a belief, without needing to be some kind of identity at all. It's flourishing. And why is it flourishing? Because it feels really good to be. It feels awesome to be free. That doesn't mean it's a positive experience. See, isn't that interesting? It doesn't matter if you're identifying or not. It's never purely a positive experience. It's experience. The difference is when you're trying to make it a positive experience, it becomes more of a negative experience. When you accept it for what it is, it becomes more of what it is. It's your preference and your opinion that colors the experience. It doesn't need to be there if you're not afraid. And you don't need to be afraid if it's always you. I've said this before. The reason I'm not afraid of the unknown is because it's always going to be me. I'm always the unknown. I'm all there is. So if I have faith in me, I don't give a fuck about the unknown. Bring it. I've always walked into the unknown. That's my fucking life. And I'm still here, as are you. You don't need to know.
You never do, because even with the idea of, freedom not being positive or negative experience, it's because positive and the negative experience necessitate thought. We have to judge it. We have to say what it is. And it's just a different fucking table. It's a entirely different reality that you're experiencing. It doesn't have the same thing. It's like speaking a different language. Like you can't say, "Oh yeah, it's a positive experience." No, it's just a different experience. You're free. It's not freedom isn't positive or negative. It's the lack of freedom that is caused by, the judgments that we have the idea of positive versus negative, but they necessitate each other. Like as soon as there's a negative experience, there is a positive experience, is the opposite end of it. And as soon as there's a positive experience, the lack of that experience is a negative experience. And we're striving for ideas. We're striving for a feeling we perceive to be positive. And in that, we're striving. And in that, we're not free. We're trying to get somewhere, trying to be something, thinking that it means something about me, which is the whole fucking prison, is me. Striving to get somewhere, striving to become something because I'm confused, because I don't see what I actually am, because for so long I was told and thought and was taught that my value is derived from all of these things by people who were caught in believing that their own value was derived from these things. And so it's this sort of cycle that continues to happen. We continue to buy into it, not even in each generation, in each fucking moment, in each day. So that means that there's always the opportunity to not continue to buy in. Like in each and every day, each and every moment, in each and every experience, every time we think about ourselves and what it means about us, positive versus the negative perspective comes in, the concern, the fear, the worry, the judgment, they all come in as soon as that happens, because that's where we think that's what we think it's the only game that's available, and it isn't. You don't have to think about yourself. You don't have to have that concern for what an experience means about you. You don't have to judge it, positive or negative. You don't have to say whether something is good or bad, because you don't know. That's settling upon a false certainty. You don't know where it's going. You don't know what's happening. You don't, but you'd rather settle upon this shallow fucking false certainty and make a judgment that keeps you from freedom always than relinquish the idea that you have any fucking idea what it means in any way, shape, or form, whether it's a positive or negative, whether it's a good or a bad thing, whether it's right or wrong. As soon as those come in, you're no longer free. With that little itty bit of judgment, changes everything, shifts everything. You're out of it. You're still in it, but you're out of it.
I want to revisit something that you just said there. There is no right thing to do. There is no right way to live. There is no requirement that you have to live up to in order to exist correctly. And as soon as you think there is pressure and a desperate need to do the right thing. And that's where that rush comes from. That's where that looking forward to some solution that's going to make you more comes from. Just the concern that maybe you could do it wrong. Maybe there's something that you're going to do that's one day going to make you less, that you're not going to be able to live as well as everybody else, which of course you're making assumptions about. So this got me thinking, because again, we're talking about a difference in perspective between the idea of you, which is, you know, a puppet made of meat on a rock that's flying through space, and the reality of you, which is the entirety of the subjective experience. And I know earlier today on Raw 47, we were talking about how dreams and imagination really are indicative of how much you are. It's just that we tend to think to ourselves, oh, well, you know, I just had that dream for 10 minutes. Therefore, it stopped existing once I stopped dreaming it, rather than, oh, yeah, I'm everything. So for that 10 minutes of this story, I dipped into another life entirely that actually does exist somewhere in space and time in the vast spectrum of eternity. We never think of it that way. And likewise, we never think of life as the accumulation of experience. We think of it as the accumulation of stuff, maybe the accumulation of value, but not the accumulation of context. And so, what I mean is that when we were born, for example, and we had that lesson where a face came up to us, reassured us, we felt better, more connected, more sure of ourselves. And then they left. And we're like, oh my God, that feeling's gone. Well, how different would it be to be able to take that experience and understand that feeling's still inside me? That feeling is still a part of me, regardless of that character leaving. The character, in fact, was just a messenger to remind me that that feeling is always available now. It's just that we get so caught up in giving all of our feelings reasons. Right? I felt so good around such and such. I could never feel that way again. Oh, you could feel that way right now by remembering why you felt so good around such and such. Unless, of course, it was egotistical, in which case you'll always need the perception of others.
It's kind of like the excuse for accepting ourselves or coming to terms with ourself or thinking that we have value. It's like we need the love or the material items as an excuse. In recognizing that it's all within you, all of the experience, all of the emotions, all of the entire spectrum, everything that could possibly be exists within you. Like we feel like we need those things as an excuse to make sense of why we're experiencing them. But as you come back to yourself and the reality of what you are and seeing that they're always there, the concern isn't there anymore. Like I've heard you say it so many times. Oh, it's all in there. Yeah, it's all in there. That's hitting different right now because it's always all in there. And you don't need a reason to make sense of it necessarily. Of course, you're experiencing that from time to time. It's in there. You're everything. You're the entire emotional spectrum. But we start feeling a certain way, and then the concern spirals that. And so coming back to that recognition that there is no wrong. There's no wrong thing to feel. There's no wrong thing to do, experience. It's in an egotistical mentality, it's fucking scary. What do you mean there's no wrong? What about that serial killer that kill you? Don't think there's anything wrong with them? It's like that is a product of the fucking mentality that we're talking about. That's a product of the existing mentality in thinking that there is objective right and wrong. Through recognizing that there isn't, there's not so much a path for that to be expressed anymore because there isn't so much resistance to where we're at or judgment of other people. Like they're the serial killer that's so wrong had a path of getting there. You were born it. You didn't just come out of the womb and just like, jump up and stab their mom and dad and like kill the nurse and everything. They went through a bunch of fucked up shit that got them to the spot in which they feel like that is a reasonable thing to do. It's a product of the given mentality. And so when it comes back to the emotions or the experiences, if you start to experience a certain emotion and you think there's something wrong with it, you resist it, you fight it, it reinforces you experiencing that thing. It all reinforces you. The idea that anything you do is wrong or right by any means. It's just what it is. You don't need to have that judgment. It doesn't have to be perceived as positive or negative, right or wrong, as we were saying before. And just be what it is and not mean anything about you. As soon as it means something about you, You have to come up with a story as to why it's the case. Your brain has to come up with a story. Oh, I'm feeling this, and I shouldn't be feeling this. Why am I feeling this? Okay, this is why I'm feeling this, because it would rather that. It would rather come up with the destructive story that takes value away from you as opposed to just sitting in, I don't know, it's in there. Yeah, sure. I'm just going to watch it and look at it because that's uncomfortable, but it doesn't fucking drop your value 10 scales. It's the story that does that. And that's what I say up against, in quotes, but that's what the brain wants to do. It's always trying to come up with a story because it believes that you are what you think you are. So through recognizing that you're not, there's not so much need for a story that reinforces you anymore. And then you can maintain that, at least closer to that state of freedom. And your value isn't always constantly fluctuating based on what story you settle upon for why you're experiencing the thing that you're experiencing. Just is what it is. You're still free. There's still options, but it's always all going to be in there, no matter what. No matter how free you become, it's still all in there. You just don't have to judge it.
In fact, I would go so far as to say the more free you become, the more you'll see how much is in there. Because that's the thing about awareness. It means more awareness of what already is, which is you, which is why it's so intense. But I find it really interesting that basically everything that you just expressed is exactly what Jesus was talking about when he said, forgiveness by the grace of God. It's always here. It's quite literally being God in the present moment where you let the narrative go and you experience true forgiveness in recognizing there was never anything wrong. You never needed to be forgiven for anything because there's nothing wrong with getting lost and forgetting what you are. It's an experience. There's nothing wrong with it except if you're tired of suffering as a result of it, in which case that's not wrong. You've just recognized there's another option. And I think that's the thing, is that at this point in our collective growth, we have been riding out this mentality for so very long that we are all starting to recognize the collective consequence to this mentality. And so we're looking for another option. That's all it is. And it's so funny to me that it never dawns on us that the other option was there when we started the path.
And it always has been, always will be, in each and every moment, all the time. But with the forgiveness, I'm seeing forgiveness in a totally different way after this experience. And that Krishnamurti quote, "There is no compassion in forgiveness," makes a whole lot of sense, because in order to forgive, there has to be the belief that there's something wrong, that something happened that shouldn't have happened. Based on fucking what? Your perspective, your idea of what should be happening. So, oh man, because it's as much for anyone else as it is for yourself, and the ability to. So forgiveness isn't even so much a part of the equation anymore, because there's no longer, what could you possibly forgive if nothing is wrong ever, and it always is what it is, and there isn't a judgment about what's happening, and you recognize that it's all just experience happening here now. But as soon as you judge it, as soon as it's like, that's wrong, who's saying it? You are. My opinion is that was wrong. Whose opinion? Yeah, the character, story, the idea of you. So it's getting reinforced. It gets reinforced in so many fucking ways. It's nuts. It's nuts how many ways it gets reinforced. And opinion, preferences, judgments, ideas, thoughts about right and wrong, good and bad, they're all rooted in your idea of yourself, because there's no objective good and bad. It's the same. Two people could see the same exact situation, think, okay, that's good, or okay, that's bad. There's no objective. And I hear people already screaming, oh, you don't think that's bad? It's the person who was doing it didn't think it was bad. And if there's one perspective that doesn't believe that it's bad, it's not objective. As tough as that is to accept and grapple with, that as soon as one perspective thinks otherwise, it's not objective. Oh, but any sane person would believe that. Okay, so now you're, reinforcing your idea that you're a sane person. Exactly. Reinforcing the idea of you. Everything we do, it's reinforcing that fucking narrative all the time. Like, oh man, it's just hitting me how many things reinforce it. It's nuts. And so many things that we as a society are just like, don't even think twice about the idea of right and wrong, good and bad, all that stuff. And so even the, morality, 10 commandments, all that stuff, all those rules reinforce the egotistical perception of division. All of it does. Any rule book ever. Well, how will we survive? It's the other table, sitting at the other table. It's a different mentality. It'll make sense once you get there.
It's so interesting. I love the expression that every villain is the hero of their own story, because that's very much the case. None of us look at ourselves as the villain necessarily, unless there is some benefit to doing so, which is once again being the hero of our own story. So it helps to understand that identity has a consequence. It twists what we do in that it creates a sense of lack and separation from everyone else. It's just recognizing that. That's really all it is recognizing that and then being willing to explore the alternative, which we haven't. We haven't explored the alternative. Every time somebody gets close to exploring the alternative, other people wait till that person dies or they kill that person, and then they take everything they said and turn it into identity. Once again, missing the point, which is why I've said before that the sin is the sinner. The thing that separates us from God is the identity. It's the idea of ourselves, because otherwise, we are everything. And that is obvious when you're not a concept. See, it's interesting. If you took what I just said as a concept, you've missed it. I'm not asking you to try and imagine yourself as everything. I'm saying that the reality right now and always is that you are everything you know. Without you, there is no experience. How much is within that? Often we think about the life we've lived, the jobs that we've had, the people that we've known, the things we've accomplished, and all of that, and we completely disregard the daydreams, the imagination, the dreams themselves, the ability to empathize, the emotional spectrum, and everything else that goes into our incredible experience. Because we have this idea of ourselves that everything else is filtered through. And so while we are still experiencing being everything, we translate it as being something. And that changes how we experience it, simply because we've narrowed it down to something that we feel comfortable taking and experiencing. And it's not the entirety of us. And so we can't recognize how much we are until we let that go and just be.
Yeah, you can't recognize that through maintaining the story or the idea. It's not that you can, it's almost like you can't even recognize the benefits to letting go until you start to. And we want to, in the egotistical mentality, that is fucking frustrating. Like we're like, well, why? Why should I do it? Fucking try and find out. But you can't say it because it's a complete shift in the fabric of your reality. Like everything that you've clung to and derived value from is from that illusion that you're something, that you're something. That's it. But you can't see the benefit until you're willing to take that first step, until you're willing to question it. And I think that's why so often people who start to recognize this, they experience enough in this mentality to be willing to step into that uncertainty, be like, all right, I've been here, done that. This kind of sucks. There's a lot of suffering here. So let's find out. Let's find out what this is about. And a lot of times it couldn't possibly be worse than what I'm going through right now, but it's not always even that. It's sometimes it's just enough. When it's just enough. You're like, all right, there's got to be a different way. Got to be a different way to live, and that willingness to step into that uncertainty is oftentimes followed by seeing enough in this experience of suffering. So it's very rare that someone who doesn't experience any suffering in an egotistical mentality, or at least, because it's not to say that no suffering, but enough, they're deriving enough benefit from the egotistical mentality along with the suffering, but they're willing to deal with that suffering and not question it because they feel like they're becoming something. But you have to be willing to step into it's just stepping into uncertainty, really, is what it is. And that's the state that it remains as, because it's not one step, it's not one choice. Like, all right, I've had enough of this. I'm going to step into this. It's each and every fucking moment, every day, every moment, every experience that you go through is the willingness to step into that uncertainty that you always are. That's the thing too, is you're always stepping into that. You're just keeping freedom at bay by thinking that your prison's really pretty. Like, oh, this is good enough. It's at least my prison looks better than their prison. But it's so that keeps you from being willing to find out what is outside that prison door. But you can never know what that is until you step into it and start to see for yourself. And no one can say it. Messenger is always a traitor. That whole thing. No one can ever say what it is. You have to be able to find out for yourself. And you can only do that when you're willing to let go of the prison that you're maintaining because you think your values derive from that.
And that right there is where my issue with snake oil salesmen come from. And it's just because they are trying to polish the turd. They are trying to tell you there is a place that you can get to where you feel one and at peace and connected all the time. And it's awesome. It's beautiful. You can get there by learning certain concepts and doing certain practices. And if you just understood this, none of that's true. None of that's true. You're never, ever going to escape the all and everything of what you are. The only thing you can do is just become more familiar with everything you are. That's really it. Gain more awareness of it. Because the problem is that you keep getting blindsided by your lack of willingness to look at it. That's really all it is. I've said this before about people who are always looking for the best in others. That comes from only wanting to see certain things in themselves. It's the reason they get blindsided by those people, because they don't want to recognize that as much as you have all of the aspects of a hero within you, you also have all of the aspects of a villain. We all do. So how much are you blinding yourself based on what you want to see in yourself and what you don't? And that's really the whole point, is letting go of that. That is the transition. I thought this was really interesting because I've said this to clients in the past. You already feel uncomfortable, or you already feel anxious. You already feel depressed. Let's just sit in it. Just sit in it instead of giving it a meaning, instead of giving it a reason, instead of trying to escape it and make sense of it. Just sit in it. And that's it. And oddly enough, it's right there that there's an insight, almost always, because we're not looking at it for what it is. That's why it gets worse. We keep running from it. So our fear actually makes it worse. But it's not what we think it is. That's the only reason we don't want to look at it. But as soon as we look at it, just like fear, as soon as we look at the fear itself, not the reasons that we think we're afraid, but the experience of fear, our fear changes. And it's because we're not running from it. We're putting all and everything we have into it. And that's where the processing starts. We don't recognize that we are intelligence. Any problem that you have, give your full attention to. And it will start to work itself out. That doesn't mean try to work it out. It means stare at the fact that you feel like there's a problem and just take accountability for the fact that it's just a feeling. Don't give it meaning. That's it. Just let it pass. right? Look at it as it goes past, but remain unattached. Remain unattached. Like I have so many emotions in a day that I don't attach to. I see them go by, I go, wow, and I feel them wholeheartedly. And a lot of them relate to Ray, the character. But I know that at the same time, it's just a part of the process that Ray, the character, is going through. And so I don't identify with it because it doesn't mean anything about where Ray, the character, is going. It's just a product of where Ray, the character, can accept that he's been.
And that's it too. Because even in this conversation, I still tend to maintain like the idea of freedom. Still, there's a part of me that's like, yeah, but it leans positive. It's a little bit more positive than negative. It's like, no, it's not. It's not about that. You can't remain free and create a story of what you're experiencing. And as long as there's not a story attached to it, a reason for it, you remain free, no matter what you're experiencing, even if it is an uncomfortable experience, an uncomfortable emotion. You can be free in that too. Freedom isn't just the beautiful sunshine, rainbows, love and light fucking shit and that whole mentality. It's not that. It's just not attaching to a story out of fear, out of a desire for certainty. That's all it is. And through that, it like it passes through you more quickly. You're able to maintain yourself in it, not get lost in the emotion, in the story that you want to create. Because it's like, okay, this is uncomfortable. So you think that creating a story is going to make it more comfortable. But as you said, it doesn't. It's our perception. It's our idea. Our idea is that it does, but it doesn't. And it never does. It just eventually subsides when we decide to stop telling ourselves a story or when something else happens to come up. But it didn't have to be what we made it into to begin with. It can just be what it is, and we can maintain our freedom in that when we don't immediately grab onto some sort of story, some sort of narrative in order to try and feel a little bit more comfortable in that discomfort. You can just sit in the discomfort and remain free. You can maintain that freedom despite whatever emotion, whatever experience you're going through. You can always remain free as long as you don't attach a narrative and a story as to why it's happening and what it means about you and all that shit, because it never does. But we just create the story that reinforces the idea of us, that sends us spiraling and keeps us in that vicious cycle. When do you want to arrive? When do you want to let go of that story, of the idea that it means something about you? I can't convince you of that. It's on you.
I find it really funny that we really do try to exist based on our expectations of both what we would like and think would be the best for us and what we fear and think would be the worst for us. And yet the reality is never what we expect, regardless of how it turns out. But it's our expectations that turn those experiences into positive or negative experiences. And if our expectations are met, that turns it later into a negative experience because now we start to depend on having our expectations met. And if they're ever not, there's so much more riding on it. And so it's so interesting that we have these massive expectations of reality and ourselves. And the reality is far more than our expectations could ever imagine.
Because there's no amount of expectations that can ever be it. We keep trying. We keep trying. We keep having them. They're never met. They're never what it is. So expectations will always lead to some degree of suffering, some degree of a lack of being what we think that it is. So it's never necessary. But in order to maintain our idea of ourselves, we almost have to have expectations, or we perceive a benefit to having some sort of expectations because we would rather have an idea of what it means about us than not knowing. And it's always just that avoidance of the discomfort that comes with the reality of uncertainty. Like all of these things are the avoidance of that. You don't know. You never have. You never will. There's no need to come up with an expectation for what it is. Ever, 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 ever. Oh, but this time, nope, not that time either. Oh, but this, nope, never. It always distorts it. It always creates some degree of suffering, even if they're met, because it reinforces you. Because there are times where it gets, you have an expectation, your expectations are exceeded. It reinforced you, though. And so you're going to do it again, and it's not going to be met. And that's it. But we have enough of those experiences where the expectation is met or exceeded. We're like, okay, this is a worthwhile endeavor. But it also is taking away from your experience here now because you have an expectation of it and where it's going and what you want to get out of it. And then you're not experiencing the fullness of that, which is all it is. It's all reality is your experience here now.
How many people do you know who go out and buy lottery tickets just because they won $20 once upon a time? Right. And it really is that, like, it worked once, could pay off in a big way. Right. And that's it. And so we go into relationships with that same mentality. And I know I can hear the question. It's so funny when you're like, well, what about this? No. Well, what about this? No. The most obvious one is immediately relationships, because that's where we feel it's necessary to have expectations. And I will say straight up, in a relationship, if you are having expectations, that relationship isn't going to last very long. And what I mean by expectations, it's not to say that you shouldn't set boundaries. It's not to say that you shouldn't have a line in the sand where you're not willing to give up your space or give up what you are so you can be free and effective and sensitive and empathetic and all that other stuff. But that's not an expectation. And what I mean is that if your partner doesn't respect that space, getting upset with them because they should isn't going to help you. Communicating that they're not respecting that space in a calm, empathetic manner where you can relate to why they're not respecting your space is going to be far more effective. But it may mean that your relationship is going to end. It may mean that you have to accept the reality that the person that you're with maybe doesn't resonate with the person you're becoming. And so we would rather have expectations and get frustrated that they don't live up to them than just allow ourselves to change.
And there's so much involved in that too, because there's that feeling like we need to be in one. And that means something about me and all the narrative that leads up to being in that relationship and in that situation. And the willingness to let go, the willingness to allow it to fizzle out, allow it to end, allow it to just be what it's going to be. You have to be able to recognize that your value isn't derived from that. Because as long as it is, you're fucked. It's going to distort everything about that. You're not going to be able to have, those conversations. You're going to maintain certain expectations and then fight when they're not met because you need it. Because you need that relationship in order to feel better about yourself, in order to think that you're valuable. So there's a root to that, as we were talking about earlier in the episode, that gets you to a place you let go of that need for anything outside of yourself in order to provide any semblance of any value to you, because you've recognized the reality of what you are. And then everything's available to explore. Every conversation is willing to be had because there isn't the fear anymore. And you're prioritizing you and your experience as opposed to your narrative and what you think other people are going to perceive it as, and how they're going to see you. Because it's never been about that, because there are no other people. You're just interacting with yourself. You're just seeing yourself. But the more lost you are in the idea of you, the more other people there are, the more perspectives there are, the more things there are to live up to. And then it makes it very difficult to have those conversations and let go of those expectations. There has to be a willingness to let go of the situation as you let go of the expectations.
And this goes back to a conversation we once had about wanting and feeling better. That we often think getting what we want is the reason we feel better, rather than no longer wanting giving us a sense of peace and the cessation of stress, right? So we use the getting what we want as a justification to allow ourselves to be for a very short period of time. And then all of a sudden we want something else, right? Because otherwise we're just left with ourselves. And that's why the things we want often don't make us as happy as we would like them to for as long as we would like them to, because happiness comes from us. Happiness is derived from us. It's just that we have fallen into the habit of justifying the feeling that we have access to all the time with a reason, such as getting what we want or having someone validate us. We never needed that reason. It's just a placebo.
Fuck, it really is just always everything we do is just an excuse to experience the thing that we're experiencing. Like we need a story because we're a story. If I feel happy, I need a reason to feel happy. I can't just experience that state. So then I experience it and I'm confused into thinking that it was because of a thing that I got. And then there's a story that goes along with that. Oh, I'm happy because I got that. That's how I get happiness. Is that thing. It's from that person. It's from that validation. It's from that love. It's from that car. But it was never that. It was what's available to you always when you don't need so much anymore. You get the thing that you think you need. You get the thing that you think you want. You get that cessation, as Ray was saying, of the need, of the want. And that cessation is where happiness is allowed to arise through that. But we're so caught in always wanting something, expecting something, needing to get somewhere, always on a journey, always on a path, always moving towards some goal that we can't find an excuse to be happy until we get to said made up goal. But it's always available in each and every moment. And it's not even about, I'm not trying to say that happiness is like the end all be all by any means, but it's something that's available all the time, along with every other emotion. And the freer you are, the more willing you are to experience all of those things. Because if you're not free in yourself, you'll build an attachment to that happiness. And you'll feel like that's something you need to be experiencing all the time. But it's not about that. It's just about experiencing. And if you're always happy, it becomes less of the thing that you think it is, because it just becomes the sort of baseline, just like with any other emotion. You experience enough of it, and it's not even that you want more of it, you just want something different. And then you get something different, but because you're so caught in the idea of you and the story and needing an excuse for experiencing that, it's like inside of you, you want a different experience, but then there's a concern for experiencing that thing. And then there's a story that goes along with that and what it means about you. So we're always just fluctuating between all of these emotions that we're always going to be experiencing. And it's just about our experience of them. But because we have a story that's attached to it, it means something about us. And all of a sudden it becomes a part of our narrative. I'm a sad person. What the fuck? We've actually gone that far. We've been able to say, like, I am a anxious person or a depressed person, as if that's just the constant state that we're existing in, but it reinforces that state. And then we'd rather be certain about that than be willing to be uncertain and then go back into experiencing, recognizing that all of those things exist within us. But we're so fucking limitless that we're able to hinder our ability to experience all of the emotional spectrum because we settle upon being certain things in a story that reinforces us only being able to experience certain aspects of it. But they're all available all the time. You just have to be willing to let go of the story you've always told yourself.
That's fucking beautiful. It's so interesting, right? That the identity that I cling to is the source of lack that I hope my expectations will save me from. And yet the fulfillment I'm looking for is what exists when I let those expectations go. I love how simple it is, but it really is a process because we've never practiced. our society does not practice this. This is not a conversation that we have without making it all weird and spiritual and religious and turning it into another identity that defeats the goddamn purpose entirely. So, really simple. It's just not easy. It's just a matter of practice and continuing to have the will to let go and surrender and see how much you are. And I think that this is an excellent place to end this episode. This has been a lot of fun. If you haven't checked out Raw, episode 47, I absolutely recommend it. Fantastic conversation. Likewise, the conversation that followed on Patreon was intense and deep and really insightful. We do post all of those after the fact. So if you can join us on Patreon, we would love to see you. But Andrew, man, that was awesome.
Yeah, I knew we were going to get into some stuff, and it's just like we went, it's all interrelated, obviously, but from this morning's Raw to this, it seems like it was a continuation into the depth, but from a different point of view, as always. And so, yeah, this has been a ton of fun. It's been an interesting one. I knew this was going to be a fun one, but yeah, I'm glad. I'm glad. I don't know. I'm just glad we fucking had it as always. But yeah, I appreciate everyone for sticking through this one. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. And yeah, we'll talk to you all soon.
It's fucking good to be back. See you next week.
Bye, everyone.